Kiyosaki, and here we are today with another issue or episode of the Capitalist Manifesto. The Capitalist Manifesto is probably the reason I wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad, is what about financial education? You know, a lot of Americans don't know what socialism is, or communism, or Marxism. So Capitalist Manifesto is a way of explaining the differences between Marxism, socialism, capitalism, and fascism. So we're interviewing people who have actually had real life experiences in Marxist or fascist or socialist countries. And now we have my friend Barry Mitchell, who is from Zimbabwe, and he actually had to run from Zimbabwe. So he knows firsthand what happens when Marxists, socialists, or fascists take over a country. And Zimbabwe was at one time the richest, most highly educated country in South Africa. So Barry, welcome to the Capitalist Manifesto show.
Hey Robert, great to be with you. Awesome to be here.
Long time no see.
Yes, it's been a while.
We used to go to South Africa all the time. I love Africa. I love the country. Great people, great spirit. So would you mind telling the audience here, you know, what it was like growing up in Zimbabwe? It used to be called Rhodesia after Cecil Rhodes. What was it like growing up in Zimbabwe, and then the hyperinflation and this fake money, you know, the Zim dollar? What was it like growing up there?
So yeah, Robert, I think, you know, just a little bit of context in terms of where Zimbabwe came from. Like you said, Zimbabwe was the breadbasket of Africa, and I can remember, you know, growing up as a teenager, and in the most, it was God's own country. You know, it was the after independence in 1980, the economy was flourishing. You know, jobs, businesses were flourishing, and for sort of 15 years, it took off. And sort of in 1995, you know, the rumblings around taking commercial farms, redistribution of land, and all that sort of stuff really sort of started taking off and escalated into sort of the late 90s into the 2000s. And within, you know, a short space of time, an amazingly economically strong country, you know, a country that was probably the second largest producer of tobacco in the world, for example, you know, an incredible producer of minerals, sort of collapsed overnight.
So, you know, this was basically communism, redistribution of wealth. They take from the bourgeoisie and give to the black leaders. That's what they did. And that's what, and Mugabe at one time was a pretty good leader, wasn't he? The president of, you know, he was a good man for a while. Something happened.
Yeah, I mean, he was a great leader. You know, Zimbabwe at one stage, he focused on education. It was the most educated country on the African continent. You know, produced highly educated school people. And I think, like everything, you know, politics plays such a huge part in decisions, and there was some big political rifts, and that, you know, that's the land acquisition and the redistribution of land was a major political move in order to maintain power.
So what was your family story?
So I think my grandfather first, I think he moved onto our farm, if I remember right, in 1957. My dad then joined him in I think 71. So, you know, by the time we got to 2000, we'd had that farm for nearly 50 years, you know, 40 plus years. We had a dairy farm. Yeah, my dad sort of got a letter one day, and he was told, you have 3 months to get off the farm. And that was it. And so, you know, there'd been various threats over time, and there was the expectation that that sort of thing could come anytime. So he started moving equipment off the farm, you know, relocating home stuff and, you know, that type of stuff to relive somewhere else. And one Friday afternoon, the police rocked up, bundled him in the back of the van, and put him in jail for a couple of days.
Put him in jail.
Theft and vandalism charges. So he was arrested for theft and vandalism. I mean, when I look back, my dad had it pretty lightly compared to many other farmers, but the end result was that he was a farmer by heart. He had never when I look back, he had never been sort of financially literate in terms of investing. His land was his future. That's what he always said, when I retire, this is the farm. That's what it is. And so pretty much his whole life got taken away from him in one fell swoop. And with that went pride, dignity, everything else. I say today, it took him, he died in that period of time, but it took him sort of 10 years to leave the earth, because he broke.
It took his spirit away.
Yeah.
So the other question I have was that he was thrown in jail for stealing what he owned. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Did he fight or anything, or he just say take it, or just locked him up? Or?
He didn't. They locked him up for 2 or 3 nights. Came back, packed up his stuff, and he moved off. That was it. Literally left everything on his farm. All the equipment, tractors, everything.
So your family moved from Zimbabwe to South Africa?
No, my family actually still lives there. My dad stayed there until he passed away. I moved for business reasons. I was in my early 30s. Had an opportunity in South Africa, and funny enough, I moved just when Zimbabwe in 2000, when it was really starting to get shaky. And in my mind, it was, well, we can always come back. Well, I've lived in South Africa for 20 years now, so within 2-3 years, it just went downhill.
Have you ever gone back to your family farm?
I did, Robert. I went a couple of years ago. Actually, I was back in Zimbabwe. I go there regularly to do business and train and in the country, and I took a trip out. I took the girls to go and have a look where I grew up, and it was fascinating. It was like it's what I would imagine when I was a kid watching the old Wild West movies where you see the tumbleweed roll in and the gold city, the gold town that's been sort of derelict, and there's absolutely nothing there, and the trees are regrown. I mean, the farm was reforested, the roads I had to sort of drive through, and it was really sort of the farmhouse, and that was still there. People were living in it, but there was very little going on. The whole sort of farm had reforested. It was fascinating. To a large degree, it was sad to see what was and what was now.
That brings up another question. What was race relations like between whites and blacks in Africa? I mean, were you guys SOBs to them, or was there a relationship, or do you guys get along?
No, I mean, Robert, for me, race relations for me growing up, I grew up in an era where color in my world was no issue. I've had friends, and I've always had friends of all different races, great friends of all different races, and the same as today. I think the biggest thing is that it gets politicized, and I think that's what I see in America. A lot of that's happening in America. People, the average person, for me, just gets on with their life. You like people are people. We all bleed the same. We all people are people. But when it comes to politics, politicians seem to politicize this race issue because it's the quickest way to be able to create divide in all areas. So I think like any country, if you look back in history, there was subjugation, all that sort of stuff. But from 1980, into 2000, people really got on. The country was changing. It was unifying and creating some massive results. Some highly educated people come out of Zim, and you can see them all over the world, from all colors, creeds, races, languages. that have created success. So the country was really moving, but the political, division and I suppose similar things are happening in the States. There's this big pull and largely based on race, based on what you have and what you don't have, and in a lot of cases, does it really even exist?
Did you, by any chance, pay to the attention to all the burnings and looting and fires in like Portland, Oregon, and even right down the street? I mean, 100 yards from where I am right now, they burned down like Neiman Marcus and the Apple Store and all this, and then nobody did anything. And when you see that going on in America, what do you think of from where you came from in Zimbabwe?
Well, so it was interesting. I followed that very very intently that whole period, and what was interesting is that the dialogue that comes out that people actually aren't doing anything wrong, but it's destruction, which is very similar. And it's not only in Zimbabwe. We've seen it largely throughout Africa. Very similar is that certain groups of people are allowed to get away, if you want, with murder, absolute destruction in the name of something that feeds the right rhetoric, whereas the other group is not allowed to do anything, and it just creates that division even more. So it was fascinating watching it, and then to watch the next step with what's happening with Trump now going, the differentiator between the two was fascinating, and I think that we've seen that happen often in Africa, not only in Zimbabwe, just in Africa.
So when you hear that in America they want to take away our guns, you think that's a good idea?
Yeah, interesting because I've always looked at that as a central piece in America that actually allows Americans to keep some form of sanity, some form of balance, and ensure balance. Where in Zimbabwe, for example, yes, you could own a gun, but nothing like America. So when people start talking about taking away civil rights, because that's what it is, your human right to do what your constitution says, that's when things start changing. So because that was really, constitution started changing in Zimbabwe. They changed the constitution. When the constitution started changing, that's when people's civil rights started changing. And make no mistake, this is in Zimbabwe. It wasn't a black white thing. This was a people thing. It was just one way to start creating that divide was to go after the farms. The average Zimbabwean by far has suffered tremendously. So it was just to attain more power. So that taking, like what you see in America right now, is degrading civil rights.
So what's happening in South Africa, another fantastic country? Like you live in Johannesburg, is that correct?
I do. Yeah, I live in Johannesburg. Yeah, we're in some very interesting times right now, which is, I don't have to say that, the world's in some interesting times, but in South Africa, we're in that. I think we're in the balance at the moment between, as we know, we're a pretty strong capitalist country, strong business minded, but there's also the other side of that where there's a huge poverty gap, mass unemployment. So the start of more and more demand or promises of free education, free land, and all that sort of stuff is really starting to take hold more and more. Which if you look back in history, that signals similar things that could happen.
Yeah, and South Africa is such a rich country, and it's sad,
Yeah.
Like one of my, I love Johannesburg, but your coastal cities like Port Elizabeth and Cape Town and inland, and if you ever have a chance to get to Africa before it gets worse, it's worth seeing. The spirit of the land is incredible.
We have an amazing spirit. Robert, the spirit in Africa. The spirit of the African human being is huge. And at the end of the day, creating conflict and division is I agree. That's what they break. And when you break that, people just sit back and wait to be given. When you wait to be given, you can control people.
Yeah, and as you know, like my favorite sport is rugby union. And South Africa and Australia and New Zealand, the Southern Hemisphere, have some of the greatest rugby teams going. And the reason I have tremendous respect for Nelson Mandela was when he united South Africa with the game of rugby union and not soccer. So anything you want to say, a lot of people don't, Americans don't know soccer and rugby union. We know gridiron, but by Mandela uniting South Africa with rugby union, that was heresy, wasn't it? I mean, that was a gutsy move in his part.
That was a huge move because he took what really was a white minority sport and took it to the whole country, and he used that. I mean, you know, what that reminds me is, you know, often you've taught standing on the edge, and that for me is, you know, I often use that as an example. His ability to be able to take rugby, put it on the edge, and unite a country around a World Cup, and then for you know, the magic that was created with South Africa winning the World Cup in 1995, and you know, him working together with Francois Pienaar, it was just, you know, it was a stroke of genius, stroke of magic, and united a country that really could have gone into absolute sort of despair and revenge and bloodbath, and it didn't, and yeah, it was really a stroke of genius.
For those who may not understand rugby, I didn't play rugby until I went to flight school in Florida. And that's when I started finding out about it. It's a schoolboy sport. It's a rich kid sport. Only rich guys played it. And for some reason, I felt at home. I understood the game of rugby from the moment I liked gridiron or football, but rugby was my sport. And I didn't like soccer because I couldn't hit anybody. So I loved rugby. I could hit people. And so when Mandela gets up there, we're watching his move. He just gets released from Robben Island, right? Robben, after how many years. And he has no He has no anger. And then he says, we're going to unite South Africa with the game of rugby. And here's all your black townships and all this. And they all play soccer. So he united South Africa and the world with a rich man's sport. And I mean, as a rugby player, I was near tears. That guy Mandela had so much courage. In my opinion, he's one of the greatest leaders of our time. You know, and it was such an honor to have, you know, to be in Zimbabwe, to be in South Africa, to be playing rugby, and seeing such greatness come out of chaos like that. So that's the hope, the future, is that something better will come out of this whole thing. So anyway, any final words to our audience right here? The book is called The Capitalist Manifesto. It compares what Marx said in Communist Manifesto to what is said in Capitalist Manifesto. Any final words?
Yeah, I think, Robert, the biggest thing for me was, don't get stuck on what you think you know. Go and find out what you don't know, because you know, we thought we knew what we knew when we were going through Zimbabwe. You know, a lot of people, it'll never happen, it'll never happen, it'll never happen. It happens. Just, you know, prepare yourself for the things that you don't think you need to know about, and not for the things that the world has prepared you through school, and those type of things. So just open up your mind, you know, and if you do, you'll see the things coming, and you know, in Zimbabwe, people benefited. Yet lots of great entrepreneurs prospered through that period of time because they knew how to do something different. And so if you know how to do something different, you can ride through it.
So anyway, Barry, thank you very much for contributing to our awareness of what happens when a country prints too much money or when socialism and Marxism take over. So thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Great to be with you.
Thank you. And thanks for watching this issue of The Capitalist Manifesto.